So we'll move into the next session. The next session is around brain capital, creativity, and private sector innovation. Our speakers will talk from both a corporate standpoint as well as an entrepreneurship standpoint, however that it resonates most with them. One of the things that we are very interested in is how this particular work around brain capital might be able to seed public-private partnerships between the private sector and governmental agencies and NGOs, et cetera. So first up, I'm really excited to welcome my colleague, Wendy Lee, who's a member of the National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, to our Commerce Secretary here in the U.S., Gina Raimondo. So Wendy, the floor is yours for comments around how you see this work connecting to your world and your professional life.
Oh, thanks, Leo and Theo, and thanks to everyone this morning for joining. I'm calling in from Boulder, Colorado, with a barky dog and a rainy sky. So apologies for any disruptions he may bring to bear. So I am a newly appointed member of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Council, which is part of the Department of Commerce. So I'm gonna not speak from that lens, since our first meeting is next week on July the 12th, where we'll have esteemed colleagues from around the US, both from universities, large corporations, venture capitalists, et cetera, talk about and start working on how the US can become more competitive. So that's the thumbnail there. My work now, though, is ecosystem innovation and development, currently in Colorado, formerly in Ohio. And so my perspective, Theo, today will be from that lens. And the thumbnail is this. Global organizations, the largest in the world, an example would be P&G in the CPG industry, or Kroger in food retail. They have long understood the need for change and innovation on the digital side and on the overall business process side. So in my experience working with very large corporations in specific states and geographies, they're not confused about the role innovation and entrepreneurship plays at all. How they act on that, how they operationalize their aspirations for growth, organic growth in particular, is unique for each industry and for each company. But be assured, at least from my perspective of one, that global organizations, publicly traded global organizations, are all in on creativity, on innovation and entrepreneurship, even though they move at different paces than a startup would. So I wanted to start with that, and then I'm going to go quickly, Theo, to comments relative to the public sector, which I have experience in here in Colorado and in Ohio. Of course, that's just a different beast, meaning a lot more exposure, a lot more requirements, compliance activities, et cetera. But I will also, at least from my perspective, say that state and local government is all in too. And that certainly has been driven by a gnarly set of crises triggered by the pandemic. So I'm encouraged that both the public sector, the global private sector, and of course, entrepreneurs that are starting businesses from scratch completely understand the role of creativity and the role they play in creating a thriving economy. What I'm not sure about is how to integrate some of the other concepts that you guys are referencing in your study, specifically on the neuroscience side, which is, of course, wrapped around AI. I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done with the public and private sector so they can understand the correlation between the brain per se, neuroscience, and all this innovation and drive for growth in organic ways. So that's all I have. Hey, Michael, you're right here in front of me.
Great. I'm sorry, my equipment situation is not good, but I'm happy to be participating.
That's good. It's just all of a sudden you're taking up my screen and it's a beautiful thing. I'm just saying you are front and center. Okay, that's all I have, Theo.
All right, thank you so much, Winnie. And that's actually, and I shared the Energize Colorado work, especially around the hope piece as a metric that's happened here with the group earlier.
Yeah.
That's a happy coincidence because Michael, you are next up on the agenda for comments.
And he's ready. Michael is ready.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me to participate. And just to help me pace myself, what's my time frame here?
Right around 5 minutes.
Oh, very good. Okay. Well, what I can say that I think might be useful is this. I think, as you may know, I am a psychiatrist and a serial entrepreneur, and I work exclusively with entrepreneurs. And for I think the purposes of this conversation, what's relevant is that entrepreneurs, our research has found, have a very specific personality profile, and it reflects underlying personality traits that are genetically transmitted. One of the personality traits are 50% genetically transmitted and 50% shaped by environment. One of those personality traits is referred to as openness to experience. And this trait is the trait that's most highly associated with creativity, sensuality, aesthetics, sensibilities, open-mindedness, interest in experiencing new things, kind of liberal, non-judgmental, tolerant values. The second trait that is common to entrepreneurs is called extroversion. And people who are extroverted, as you imagine, get energized by their relationships with other people. And so they're outgoing, they're warm, they tend to be assertive, they tend to gravitate to leadership roles, they can exhibit dominance behavior. And I want to just focus on those two traits in particular, because those traits, well, there's the third trait that's common to entrepreneurs is a subtrait of sort of a meta trait referred to as conscientiousness. And the subtrait is kind of achievement orientation, which is what it sounds like it is. So when you package this kind of motivation, drive, achievement orientation with kind of an outgoing, extroverted personality and an elevated openness to experience, elevated creativity. And what I didn't mention is that it's also associated with elevated intellect. That package of traits is what has been found over and over again to define the entrepreneurial, the propensity for entrepreneurship. And if you have that propensity, that means it's more likely that you'll become an entrepreneur. That a lot of other factors go into that as well. But as it pertains to creativity, the way in which entrepreneurs create value is through innovation and improvisation. And so those are the specific dimensions of creativity that allow entrepreneurs to create value. And innovation is different from classic creativity in that it gets implemented. So it's one thing to have a creative idea, but it's something else to take the creative idea and do something with it. And because of this drive, motivation for achievement, and because of the social capital that results from the extroversion and social networks, and the dominance behavior. The entrepreneurs are, unlike other people that have elevated openness to experience, are uniquely able to create value by installing innovations. So I'll stop there, but the main point as it pertains to this conference is that this is 50% genetically transmitted. It can be visualized on brain scans, and it's a finding that's been replicated with tens of thousands of entrepreneurs, including our own research.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Michael. As you were talking, it was resonating with me very much. We're working on some entrepreneurial projects here that add curiosity assessments into the front end of the investment in entrepreneurial ventures to kind of understand where we might have missed potential successful entrepreneurs by looking at them through more traditional ways of thinking about entrepreneurship. So I really enjoyed how you were talking about openness to new experiences and its relationship to creativity and so forth.
Yeah, the biological term for curiosity is reward seeking.
Sure.
And in the language of entrepreneurship, it's called opportunity seeking.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating to think where all of this might be able to go in helping to guide entrepreneurial investments, both at local as well as national levels.
Yeah, Theo, just to add one point, Michael, to your comments, which I really appreciate. I think there is a very specific difference in an entrepreneur and someone who refers to themselves as an innovator. And I'm not a researcher, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm just an entrepreneur, but I will say that innovators they like to talk about their ideas, and because there's a lot it's usually a big idea. There could be a lot of blockers preventing the innovator from actually doing something with the idea. I see a lot of innovators in corporations, and also in universities. Both sides are excellent, but when it comes to entrepreneurship, that's where I think the need to action and apply whatever idea you've come up with whatever hypothesis you have at the time. In other words, entrepreneurs are impatient. And so I want to vet that with you and others. I see innovators as more patient and thoughtful, and they want to research it and talk about it and thought lead around it. I see entrepreneurs, not just
the entrepreneurs are more impulsive.
Yeah, impulsive. Maybe that's the word. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. In the interest of time, we've got other speakers queued up.
Oh, so sorry about that.
If we could save this for the Q&A, that would be awesome. It's a great conversation. It's not a comment on the conversation. I just want to honor everybody's time. Bernd, speaking of entrepreneurs and innovators, let's go to you next.
Yeah, thank you, Theo. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for listening to all those fantastic ideas and speakers here. I'm not a researcher, I'm an entrepreneur. It's the number sixth company I'm now founding. There have been some private and public, and there are also some public-private ventures having been created. And from this experience, I will give you a micro perspective on this topic of creativity and health and brain capital. I very often experienced, especially when you set up creative companies, which are from the public sector, that you are welcomed even in the press, saying, well, here are the crazy guys. So you're immediately kind of suspected to be rather ill. Huge newspapers who writing this, here are the creatives, the crazy guys coming. And so it's not always that the creative entrepreneur, if it's a public or a private one, is working in a trusted environment. I, in fact, rather learned to take it as a given that I'm entering a non-trusted environment, and only as an exception, creativity and this capital in the brain is working in a trusted environment. So I thought to myself, well, when you're being creative in such a setting and you're suspected to be mentally ill, what are those signs you are really ill? You're not really working and leveraging your brain capital properly. And I think those experiences now from some 25 years in creating companies might also serve as a really kind of micro matrix, maybe something researchers can pick up on. So the first one, an indicator that the success is not there. You asked for success, Theo, but I turned it around. Yeah, falsification helps. I learned in my studies. So the very first indicator it doesn't work is if somebody who brings forward a creative idea excuses themselves, says, I have, excuse me, please, I'm breaking boundaries here, or maybe you think I'm crazy, but here is an idea, please think about it. So this making yourself small and excusing, and if you find a partner even in negotiations or in companies, always starting to excuse himself, there is something wrong. On the other hand, if you present a great idea, which you believe to be great and which you believe to really be, out of the box, breaking boundaries, just as Carlo said, we are now have to work all within planetary boundaries. I would dare say, for creativity's sake and also the artistic freedom, there must be still space not to care about planetary boundaries, to be out of bound. That is, when it's out of the comfort zone. So if you think you're out of bound and nobody says no, nobody criticizes you, something is wrong. You're not really out of bound. All the other ones can't handle it. So, there is something also to look into. How do you leverage this capital in your brain? If you don't tick people to say no, something is wrong. So that's the other matrix I have from my really personal experience. And the other one is, if this situation is there, that a creative process, a design thinking process or other processes are sticky, they don't move and they feel really ill. And you get this feeling in negotiations and in setting up companies, then I always, and I know that's a common thing, probably research will just say, yes, check, but it's just, laughing and having fun while being creative, even on very serious topics, on life and death topics, is important. So if in those creative processes, no fun can be produced, you might say a trusted environment, but that's not really the same. You can have fun and laugh without having a trusted environment. That's also a relief. So I think that's a positive indicator to comply with your question, Theo, at the very end. If there is a positive indicator, it's laughing together as a way forward to really utilize this capital in the brain. And likely the researchers here in the room can explain me why laughing creates a certain vibe in your brain that hopefully supports this. But these would be my observations at this cutting edge of private and public enterprises and public-private, how do you say this? Public-private corporations. Yeah, so my time is up and I hope I could give you some micro experiences which helps your big agenda. And thanks for inviting me again.
Thank you so much. In like literally like 20 seconds or less, could you share with the group what happened in the last couple of weeks with the culture and creativity pillar?
In 20 seconds, yeah, for the cultural creative industries in Europe, there will be a new innovation agency which tackles the silos of research, business, and policy and education. Its main task is to integrate all those silos to promote innovation. And for this, it can create some 7 offices across Europe. It gets an initial funding of 210 million euros and will grow to something like 800 million euros, and invest in innovation programs which researchers, companies, entrepreneurs, single artists can apply to, and they can even apply to together. So the application not any longer the research one, where only the university apply for the 10 million euro projects and the artists apply for the 10,000 euro projects. So they're here being merged to come up with a new, more holistic set of innovations. And those innovations are all tuned to what Europe calls the global challenges. I'm aware that in China and United States, global challenges will be different. So here in Europe, this buzzword really means the green transition, a just, green transition, which is socially viable and resilient to be a carbon-free continent by 2050.
Great, thank you, Bernd. If you could put the link in the chat function, if you want to find out more about that, that would be fantastic.
I'm happy to do that.
Great, thank you. Alejandro, we'll come to you. You had some great questions earlier. If you want to bring those up again as you're talking, that would be great, or we can do them in the Q&A.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. Fascinating to hear everybody's talk, and the more I hear, the more ideas come to my head, and the more confusion comes to my head as well. It's definitely not an easy topic. Just as a background, I'm a faculty member at the Global Brain Health Institute, particularly located in Trinity College in Dublin. I'm a neural engineer, so I'm more concerned with the neurotech aspect of brain capital. So when we talk about metrics for brain capital, what better metrics than actual tech-based objective metrics of performance in this case. But some of the things I would like to echo here is the differences at levels in which creativity happens. So of course here this block right now is concerned about the private sector and entrepreneurship, but that is, in my opinion, a layer on top of creativity. Everyone is creativity, not only the innovators, not only the entrepreneurs. And we were having a discussion on the chat here earlier, there is creativity in survival as well. So when we talk about creativity, it's really driven by environmental factors in a way. If you have thriving factors, your creativity will be geared towards innovation. If you are not thriving factors, your creativity will be geared towards survival. So we had an event here in Dublin a couple of months ago, Creative Brain Week, where we brought over a number of Atlantic fellows in equity and brain health to talk about creativity. And one of them was a display of beautiful everyday pictures of people in Peru. And what you could see in that artistic display was that not only the art itself was beautiful, but what it was capturing was incredible. It was capturing people at the lowest of the resources reach, thriving in society, creating beds out of how do you call it, pylons, creating houses out of plastic bottles, this type of things that may not actually contribute to economic growth of the country, but actually are manifest of creative approach to resources. So that is something that in the context of brain capital, we have to acknowledge, and we have to think as a compounding effect that we have. So what do we want to achieve with the brain capital index? Is it just about economic, socioeconomic status, or is it a more complete holistic view of society? Talking a little bit about what Harris was saying earlier today, brain health is not only the absence of neurological diseases, it's also the functioning of the brain in whatever state it is. So thinking that someone that may have a neurological disease or might have a neurological disorder is not entitled to creativity is wrong, right? So this is what we're trying to think within the Global Brain Health Institute, is bringing an equity to brain health, equity to creativity as well. And why not, as Enrique was saying, tune the environment to particular needs of people so that they can thrive in their creative or in their brain capital. So there's a way in which we can learn from this and have modifiable environments to make people, or allow for people to thrive. And that may be reflected even more on a larger index on the dashboard. So it's interesting to revisit some of those definitions that we have in the dashboard and think about where are we being siloed or narrow-minded towards only growth and not only equity for everybody else in this concept? There was one more aspect that I thought was interesting to mention, and it's just slipped my mind. But one of the key components to these discussions is the transdisciplinary aspect of the research, right? So, of course, from policy making, from economy making, we don't have the full picture. We also need as well the psychiatry, the psychologists, the neuroscientists, the neural engineers, the technologists to come together, the creatives to come together and elaborate in it. So it's important always to listen and to create this type of fora. This is amazing, that where people can come from different backgrounds and chip in these discussions. So it'd be great to continue to have that open-mindedness in that sense. One of the core factors of GBHI is bringing people from different geographical backgrounds, socioeconomic status, with the idea of chipping away the stigma that there is towards brain health and creating more awareness about it. Because as Enrique said, retrospectively looking back in your life, knowing that you have a diagnosis that you didn't know about can really knock you off your trail, right? So trying to come to sense, why did you have 10 years of this type of behavior? And when you get your diagnosis, you're like, oh, that's why. And not knowing these things, not knowing that this exists, hinders a little bit this brain capital concept. So it's important to make an emphasis on that. Going back to something that I wish I could see more, and that is the tangible evidence on the value of non-pharmacological interventions in brain health. And this is something that I don't know the answer to it, but is it because of consensus in definitions or methodologies or understanding of how we are defining these metrics? So this is something that comes often in WHO reports and recommendations, is that there's not enough evidence to suggest that this type of interventions will generate benefit in a particular aspect of society or a particular problem. So it's really something that I wish we could see more, and maybe by creating this type of communities, we can come to consensus of how we're actually measuring something and really stick to our metrics so that they could be translatable, comparable, and then we can follow them up eventually. So that is something that I think it needs more development, not only from the economic and policy perspective, but actually also from the research field. When you ask a plethora of researchers what creativity is and how to measure it, you open a can of worms. You're going to get 1,000 definitions of creativity and 1,000 ways of assessing creativity. So we need to be more talkative about it and come to an agreement of at least how we're planning to measure this over the next couple of years.
Great, thank you, Alejandro. And it keeps coming up over and over in all the different contexts of this discussion today that context matters, and these social agreements that we make as societies feed into it. As you were talking, I was thinking about how conversations I often have with my colleagues in the UK or in Europe, the way that things like education and healthcare have been funded differently there from how they've been funded in the US, where you are potentially at risk financially for a bad health outcome, creates a different context in which things, decisions and operations take place inside of, and that matters. So thank you. Mary Rose Flanagan with the Alliance for Arts in Research Universities. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Theo. I'm just gonna do 2 of your prompts in the interest of time. It's been a great discussion. So A2RU is an organization that we work to fully integrate the arts in teaching, research, and practice. I use fully to mean on a level playing field with STEM and the humanities. We do this in the context of higher education, but in the next decade, we are looking to work cross-sector. The educational system, especially in the US, higher education operates in disciplinary silos. The disciplines are separate, and especially the arts are held separate, not integrated in research, teaching, and practice, not integrated to the central work of the research enterprise of these universities. So we work to create channels and pathways to fully integrate the arts and also to foster transdisciplinarity for all the reasons that you were all talking about this morning. For transdisciplinarity in my network, I use the metaphor of integrated medicine to best help the patient. So we're doing the day-to-day work of kind of moving the artists and humanists out of kind of the Greek chorus role into the central dialogue and the central action of research and practice in higher education. So I don't want to make the case here because, you know, this is preaching to the choir here, but we do both very pragmatic strategies for university leaders, faculty, staff, and students to do this integration work, but we're also supporting research and advocacy in this area. So we're working on several different levels. And this year, we're looking at the topic of artistic research, helping the creatives in our network unpack and articulate their processes so they are not mysterious. The creativity is not sectioned off to one type of student or individual, depending on their major, but it's something, as we've said earlier in this convening, for everyone. Everyone is creative, but what can we mine from these processes to apply to integrated problem solving? So the other thing I wanted to talk about is the prompt, what would be the indicator of success that would be meaningful to my professional area? So we're looking, you know, in terms of the indicators in the dashboard, we're looking for artists and creative contributions to be included in the federal funding infrastructure and in policy, and also more incorporations in industry. Artists are being employed, and artists being employed equitably beyond the gig economy. So those would be indicators that would measure success for us, those three things. We are looking for successfully integrated projects that leverage artistic methodologies, perspective, and knowledge as equal collaborators in projects. So this would be something, if we saw in the dashboard, that we could kind of make the case for how important it is to have creativity leveraged. And this relates not only to what Michael said earlier as applied creativity in the context of entrepreneurship. It's not just a skill set, but it's been used on its own terms. Another thing we might want to see in the dashboard is looking at the rhetoric with policymakers, with academic leaders. How are they using creativity and talking about the arts? Are they talking about it as this vague thing that we always add on and we make sure we check that box? Are they using any specificity in their rhetoric to actually talk about what creatives can offer in all the ways that everyone was talking about this morning? So both in the corporate setting and in the higher education, the artists are often created and treated in a transactional way and not fully integrated. So we need to renormalize creativity for all disciplines. And because the artists in higher education and also in the industry sector are often treated as a magical creature, put on the pedestal, but at the same time also dismissed and not listened to and fully integrated. So the only last thing I'd want to say is one issue we have in our network is a distrust of metrics that might not be appropriate or helpful to an artist as an already marginalized group. So how can you do it in a way that that they trust it and that it's authentic, and we're not just putting economic or STEM categories. We need to come up with, I know you're all working on coming up with these indicators. So that's what I wanted to say and to contribute. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary Rose. Ben, the floor is yours.
Okay, and of course we're running out of time already. So I really just like to pile on what Mary Rose and Alejandro said, because they said things that I already had in my notes to make sure we're there. I just will throw out that we could spend 6 days talking about innovation versus entrepreneurship and, you know, ready, go. So I'm not even going to go there. I will say that and it was talked around by both Mary Rose and Alejandro, that certainly entrepreneurship in the economic sense of the word, which not everybody ascribes to it, is strongly inversely correlated with socioeconomic status. If you grow up not knowing where your food is going to come from, you're probably not going to go out there and become an entrepreneur where you have no idea how you're going to support yourself, your family, and everything else. So these are, that's why I put up there the answer to your question, Theo. One of the things I'm really interested in is the relationship between socioeconomic status, the creative process, and entrepreneurship. The theme for what I would want to pile on here is that this idea of teams and creativity. So my background, I worked for a consultancy in the Bay Area for many, many years, San Francisco Bay Area, for many, many years. And we put together teams, as Mary Rose alluded to, of artists, designers, engineers, and scientists. And it's the tension in those teams and the challenges therein that created the creative process that we then use to work with Apple, Microsoft, Logitech, Sony, et cetera. They brought us in because we had that multidisciplinary, multi-background, not just multi-thematic disciplinary, but a diversity of backgrounds, a diversity of orientation and of views that is necessary for really innovating. And somebody today said that they felt that entrepreneurship is something that happens at a fast scale, and certainly in the Bay Area and that fast scale came a lot from having incredibly multidisciplinary teams. Right now, what I do is I actually run a university level institute at Virginia Tech that funds creative projects, and we collaborate with industry to help fund those creative projects. So we look at all the time metrics of output from these projects. I bristle at the word, when you look at metrics, problem solving always comes in there. And when you talk about creativity, I always hear the words problem solving. Problem solving is a component of creativity, but it is not the thing. Otherwise, that makes all scientists and artists not creative, where that we know that they explore, they have journeys and explorations that might take them someplace or another. In terms of metrics, again, I would be looking at measures, and I'm going to tell you, before I get to the measures, I want to tell you why. In academia, and this was true for those of you that know me, you know that I was in Europe for many, many, many years. I can paste into the chat window after I'm done some of the European projects on creativity and neuroscience, just so you can kind of get an idea of where I'm coming from. But both in Europe and the US, we have these conversations about creative process, of economic benefits and innovation. But in the academy, in the universities, we still teach in silos. And we recruit in silos. And we recruit very well-supported children rather than looking at how we can recruit a broad range of children into a very interdisciplinary world that they're going to explore or problem solve in. So what I'm looking for in these measures and metrics is measures and metrics of that show the academy why industry does what it does, why we work in teams, why these creative processes are important. So the metrics would be associated with the people, the individuals, the human-centeredness of the folks that work at companies, NGOs, nonprofits, and relates them directly to how they interact in the company and the company's success. Because to me, innovation and entrepreneurship are not also, not only are they not solely individual activities, but they're also activities that have an intra-corporation, not just as separate startups. It's not one-to-one between entrepreneurship and startups. So those are the measures. That's what I would look for, and that's how I would use them. I'll just finish up with one last thing for the neuroscientists in the virtual room here. a lot of the conversation about neuroscience is about who you are, what traits you have, and how that affects your processes and creative outputs. There is also how you sense, how you see, how you experience. And there's a huge intersection, I know, I'm very well aware of the intersection between those two circles. But I will give you an example of the part of the Venn diagram that doesn't overlap. We've done a study of 30,000 people listening to music and recording their emotional and affective responses and relating that to things like, well, things like demographic, but also things like creative process. And it's their feelings that are evoked by listening to music that in many ways help understand who they are, how they sense and how they experience the world. So I just wanted to throw that in there too, that empathy and affect are an important aspect of creativity and neuroscience and who we are. So, and it may just have been an omission from the conversation today and not for lack of people on this call working on it. So that's basically it.
Thank you, Ben. We've got about 5 minutes or so left. Tassos, we're going to come to you for your comments, and then Seta will come to you for just a closing remark just at the top of the hour. Tassos, the floor is yours.
It's closed. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. What an interesting discussion we have here today. It's really great. Thank you for inviting us. Please allow me for 20 seconds to talk about in this debate about innovation and entrepreneurship. One aspect and one variable that we need to think is the intention of the person to become an entrepreneur. Because we found out that intention is very highly correlated with the creativity. And now I will come to your field, Raul, about education. How we can increase the intentions of a person to become an entrepreneur or an innovator, how we can increase this status. And we can increase only through educational system, only through education. And what we are having here, mainly in Europe, we have educational systems that does not provide creativity, but they provide what else? They are providing, memorizing the information and not to creative thinking, as we're talking about. So before discussing about new entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, we need to discuss about, you told that before, the happier students. Well, we need to talk about students that will be happy, they will have the intention to become entrepreneurs at the later stage. That's a small intervention for the previous discussion. And this is, for me, the biggest problem that we need to solve. We need to find new solutions and to create the new education 4.0, not to stick on the education of the previous centuries, but a new brain education for the brain skills. I will give an example of how we are linking, how we are intersecting the well-being and education and creativity. We are, I'm representing the Institute of Entrepreneurship Development. It's a private and non-profit organization established here in Europe. And we're recently coordinating, we're really happy that we're coordinating a European Digital Innovation Hub, which is a hub and a competence center. And the research that we have conducted recently is that we found a gap between dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and more precisely the prediction of Alzheimer with educational activities. So meaning that there is, of course, a potential patient, but also for the supporting mechanism of people with Alzheimer's disease. So there are significant evidence that support that brain training can postpone the occurrence of the disease. So we are now in a pilot phase with approximately 5,000 people, and we are developing a platform in order to predict the Alzheimer's disease. And we can include training activities in this platform. We are measuring digital biomarker, 800 digital biomarkers, DNA analysis, and wearables. So we are combined with machine learning and AI this process. So we estimate that we will be in position to correlate brain health and well-being for people to see which educational activity and which training skills can postpone the development of the disease. This is just an example of how the well-being and the brain health intersect together. So according to the second question that you posed about the intersection that we are expecting to see, I will give more questions like you have done before. Is creativity related to the higher education or not? During our research in my PhD, there is no correlation, direct correlation between creativity and educational level. No direct correlation, but it needs to be researched more. Is well-being associated with good jobs and successful entrepreneurship? We don't know yet. We need to research more, and we need to explore such correlation. Can we observe people and the environment and their daily lives to see how they are successful? We are developing a robot in order to map the activities of some people. So it is really interesting to pose us such questions and to see these intersections. So, but all these intersections does not exist. For that reason, in the Joyce Innovation Park, a recently established Joyce Innovation Park, we are starting a large-scale research to collect data from pupils from 8 years old to 14 years old, and focusing on neuroeducation. You know that very well, that you know, Harris. Neuroeducation, we design an app, and we are focusing on capturing the cognitive status of each individual, and we are also to improve their cognitive ability through their enhancement, the cognitive enhancement. So we are recording the brain activity. We have ECGs and picture recognition, and so what we can do, we can structure each pupil profile in order to see if they are happy or not, if they have the skills and the ability or not. So this is more or less what we have done. Now I'm finishing in a while. What are the characteristics that we need from an entrepreneur? And what he must do? He needs to be a decision maker. He needs to be a leader. He wants to synthesize all the data, and of course, he needs he needs ability for problem solving. We haven't identified, as all these previous speakers mentioned, we haven't identified, we cannot measure creativity, that's for sure, but we can be very, very close to it. And therefore, the question that arises is how we will be able to strengthen all these skills of individuals, startuppers, and even existing entrepreneurs, so we can help them in order to be more successful. So, and what are the measures, how we can measure this, and what are the indicators that will be really important for us to measure? For me, one of the most important indicators is the jobs, how we can better fit the new personnel, a new person that gets out from the university, how he can fit to his new job position. This is one indicator that we need to establish and to find. This is really correlated to well-being of people who are working in new job positions. The second indicator is new startups and companies in brain economy. We need more startups, we need more ideas, we need more innovation and entrepreneurs in the brain economy sector, and to correlate the startup survival rate with brain skills. This is an interesting correlation that we can do. The third one is the better training of existing entrepreneurs, this to enhance their the brain skills. And of course, the percentage of startups and projects funding from venture capitals, business angels, or other funding schemes. This is also another indicator that it is interesting to measure. That's all for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Tassos. We're running just about 3 minutes behind, but Seda, I think you had a comment you wanted to make really quick before we quickly transition to the next session.
Well, yeah, so I'm going to try to keep it very, very short. I think one thing that's really important that comes out from my conversations with business leaders, especially in European, larger European companies, is that we really need to rethink and reestablish a new kind of language around creativity to make it also more natural for the businesses here. Because when you talk about creativity within the business context, people think like they need to be kind of throwing color on the floors, or they expect to be, I don't know, playing drums and doing all the chaotic and crazy things. So we have to really start showing, especially within the context of business and sciences, that creativity is not about you being crazy and doing totally useless stuff, but it's actually something that's really that can drive also business innovation and everything around that. So for that, I have 3 thoughts I would like to leave you with. The first one is think about what the European economist Joseph Schumpeter just said at the beginning of the century. He said, every activity that brings us joy, positive activity, positively motivated activity is to be connected with the joy of creation. So we want to self-actualize as people. And the moment when we enter the realm of self-actualization, we start creating. So, and the other thing is, I think we need to really stop talking about people or pushing people out of the comfort zone, but start talking about expanding the comfort zone. And that brings in the interdisciplinarity. So I prefer talking about expansion of the comfort zone, because if we all know, if you're pushed, then you only fight or flight. But if you just go to the corners of whatever your comfort zone is, and just one step, a little bit where the stomach ache is the worst, then you start expanding. And for that, for instance, the US designer Ralph Osterhout, he goes to a nearby kiosk and starts like reading totally obscure newspapers and things just to see what's happening outside of his domain and get inspiration. So we need to tell people inspiration is not that's coming out of some metaphysical thing, but inspiration is just seeing something in one field and creating analogies to bring that thing into your own field. So that's also very practical, I think, very important point. And the third thing is I'm going to be sending you a link for this. Here it is. Please have a look. I think it's really, really important that we stop talking about the box. I have never seen a box. As long as we tell people to think out of the box, the only thing we do is that we establish that there is a box, but there are no boxes. So I think that's really, really, really important. Also showing companies that they should not be outsourcing creativity, that they should be using this potential within. According to a very interesting study done by Adobe, they say only 1 person out of 4, so it's like 75%, are not using their full creative potential at the workplace, although they want to. So just look into this room. I think we're very privileged, but when you go back to your workplace, look into any room and think about this. 75% of all those people are not even using 10% of what would be available. And imagine how fast we could move if we were able to unleash that potential, make them feel comfortable so they want to bring their innovative thinking into the day-to-day work. According to numbers by the Austrian Statistics Agency, for instance, they say that there are approximately 10 million people worldwide working in any innovation-related field. That's anything you can think of, you know, related to medicine, agriculture, social innovation. So those people are considered the qualified workers to be actively participating into the innovation process. It's 10 million sounds big, but it's less than 0.02% of the entire world population. So it kind of turns my stomach around when I think that it's a handful of people deciding about all of our future. So we have to make all these, you know, structures more permeable. So I just sent a picture of an 8-year-old girl from one of the poorest regions in Mexico. She just won this nuclear science award. She's 8 and she invented a solar heater using just trash. So imagine all that potential being really able to contribute, sorry for my talk, being really able to contribute to the creative processes for all of us. Also the grant monies at the universities, you know, people find solutions, but they're not able to bring those solutions to people who need them. Just because some gatekeeper says, no, you're not going to publish this paper because you're not a well-known name in my field. So we have to rethink all those, you know, different structures that need to be reconsidered. So to that end,
Seta, I need to navigate us to the next session.
Okay,
So
sorry. Well, good. Okay, so I'm happy to connect with everyone on LinkedIn, wherever. Cool, thank you.
I really did appreciate what you said about how do we identify all this latent capacity, what metrics could show us that, and if we can identify it, how do we then be able to invest and unlock it? So that's a good transition to the next session that we're going to kick off with Andrew. And the next session is on brain capital, creativity, and